Right, so in today's video we're going to be talking a little bit about why this lawn looks so good even though next to nothing has happened to it for the past couple of months. And when I say good, I don't mean anything like Britain's best lawn, nothing like that, but actually the fact that nothing has happened to it and it's in the condition that it's in, I think is pretty impressive, definitely for this space. Anyone who's been subscribed to this channel for a while will know that at one point this lawn used to be in an absolute state. It would be riddled with weeds all the way along. I left it far too long at times. It looked a bit of a mess, but you can see now, even if we just get up close, we've got a fairly dense sward. It's looking healthy, it's doing well, but nothing's happened to it. So why is it? And let's start by saying it's not because of what I've done. I mean, it is to an extent, like a small part of it is to do with the few little things that I've done to this space, but most of it is just nature. It is purely nature. It's not me. It's because of where this lawn is, the conditions that it's in. That's the reason why it's thrived. I'm not sure how well it picks up on camera, but you can see that this lawn slopes slightly down here towards these bushes at the front. And that's quite a big advantage that this space has over the space at the front over there. Because the lawn's on a slope, what it means is that when it rains, or even if you have like a really, really heavy rainfall, most of that water is going to obviously soak into the soil, but it's going to run off down here towards these bushes. And obviously the roots of those bushes are then going to obviously absorb a lot of that water, take it in through their root systems. And it means that the soil never stays too wet. And if we just contrast that with this lawn in the garden, I mean, it's not looking horrendous. If you saw this time last year, it was looking horrendous, but the sward is nowhere near the same. Part of that is to do with the actual grass variety. So this is a bent fescue lawn. I've got other videos on my channel explaining the differences between those different grass types, so I won't get into it today. But the one at the front is mostly ryegrass with a bit of fescue mixed in with it too. But the species of grass really isn't the reason out there as to why it's thriving. On this space in the garden, when it rains, the moisture quite literally sits in the soil. It's not completely flat. There is a tiny slope running down towards the front, and we have some drains in this space as well to take a lot of that moisture away. But it's not going to remove the moisture from the soil nearly half as well as what that space will out at the front. And again, it's the same sort of thing for this lawn up at the top as well, because the water really has nowhere to go. I mean, there are no drains in this space. It is fairly flat. It's bordered all the way around with wooden borders. The water can't escape. It sits in the soil. And if the water sits there for too long, too much of it anyway, what it's going to do is it's going to rot the roots, and then you're going to have a lot of patches in your lawn where you're going to get quite a lot of dieback. But then again, if we look at this lawn out at the front, it's thriving much better than the two lawns out in the back. And there isn't that slope for it to kind of run off anywhere at the side. So if anything, this shares a lot in common with the two in the back. But this lawn also shares stuff in common with that lawn too. And one of the big things, I mean, you look at the state that you can see my footprints here, but one of the big things is the fact that you can see it's sitting in the sun. The lawns in the garden are in the shade for pretty much the entire winter, whereas even in the midst of winter, this lawn still gets quite a bit of sun, and that's really important again for drawing moisture away from the soil, away from the plant, because a lot of that moisture is going to be able to evaporate if it hasn't ran off down towards the frontier that's in the soil. You know, the moisture that's on the grass blades can then evaporate. It's less likely to get disease, which means the lawn's less likely to thin out. And the other thing that these two lawns have in common as well is the fact that we've got a field down at the bottom there. Because like I said about the sun, where the sun's obviously going to evaporate a lot of the moisture off the actual grass blades themselves, the wind's going to support that too, because it's whipping up. Obviously all the leaves and foliage stuff from those plants there is obviously fallen off for the winter. It enables the wind to obviously come through and dry out the sward, and it means the space looks fairly nice. Often with lawn care, we give ourselves probably too much credit for how good our lawns look. Some people live in places where the conditions are really favourable to having a fairly decent lawn, and you know, they might only need to put down a few products onto the space to get it looking really nice, and it can look nice all year round too. It obviously entirely depends on where you are, what your soils are like, and a lot of that is just nature. Where I live, the soils are really heavy clay soils, which isn't really the best sort of soil for grass to grow in. Whereas for all the reasons I've said for that lawn at the front, the fact that there is a bit of a slope, the water can run off, it's sitting in the sun all day, the wind's able to dry out the sward. I've never had any disease on that space, and I think that's part and parcel because of that. There'll be things that I do to this lawn and things that I do to the lawns out in the back that I won't do to this space because nature's doing it for me. I very rarely get on that space there with liquid iron. Sometimes I do to give it a bit of a green up, but it doesn't really need it to prevent disease because, you know, the world's just doing it for me. But the lawn wouldn't look this good if it was just because of nature. There are things I've done to it to help it stay in that condition because of all the years we've lived here, this is the best sort of winter this lawn's had. The first thing I've done is I've just kept on top of cutting this space. Quite a lot of people, when it gets to the likes of September, will just leave the lawn completely and then come back to it in March, April time. And the issue with that is your lawn can get a little bit out of hand, it can get a little bit too long. Some of the smaller grass blades and grass plants can die back, which can lead to obviously thinning in your lawn. You'll end up with more thatch in the space, which means then when you get to the next spring, you need to do a little bit more work that isn't really necessary if you just keep on top of your cutting schedule. Obviously, it doesn't need to be every week when you get into those months through the autumn, but just as and when it needs the cut, I was cutting all through October, the odd time in November, and even in December, this space had a cut, and it's just kept that sward at a nice length. It's been fairly healthy, the wind can pass through, the grass blades can dry out, and it's kept it looking really nice. This has arguably been the worst of the 4 lawns that I've got, whereas this year, it's arguably in the best condition of all of them. And the second thing as well is actually keeping it fed on a fairly regular cycle. And the main reason why I've got on and fed it as regularly as I have is because of the reason I said before about why this lawn's thrives so well. Because it is on a slope and a lot of the water runs out of the soil down to where these bushes are at the bottom here. That water's taken a lot of the good bacteria, a lot of the nutrients with it, which can often leave this lawn looking a little bit yellow, a little bit deprived of those key things that it actually needs to survive. What this lawn benefits from is those regular feeds, because you're constantly adding good bacteria to the space, you're constantly adding nutrients, which is keeping this lawn looking fairly healthy. So if I was to say how much of it was down to me and how much of it was down to nature, I'm giving myself maybe 10 to 15% of the credit. Nature's getting, 85-90% of it, because like you've seen from the lawns I've showed you in today's video, you can do all you want to your lawn. You can put products down, you can aerate it, you can do all these mad things, but really, if your lawn's in a favourable space, it's going to thrive more than any other. So whilst we've got the sun out, and this feels like one of the first days where we've actually had a fairly decent sunny day for a long time, let's get the mower, let's give this lawn a cut, and that's probably all we're going to need to do to keep this lawn in a healthy condition. So there we go, that's all we've done to that space today, just giving it a quick cut to keep on top of it. And if you'd like to follow along with any more lawn care videos, we've got loads coming up in the next few months. We obviously have these spaces in the garden which we're going to be working on, getting them back to the former glory where they were last spring and summer, and obviously a lot of lawn stuff out at the front on that small lawn too. And I've also got some ideas for some garden renovation stuff that's going to be going on in this space too. So if you're interested in following along and you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Like the video if you enjoyed it or found it useful. And yeah, finally, thanks for watching.